just in terms of the timeline, what happened yesterday, there was the motion to table, and that 11 Republicans voted against it. All the Democrats voted against the motion to table, which kept the privileged motion to vacate the seat alive. All they needed was 5 votes from the Republicans for to prevent the motion to be tabled and to get rid of Kevin McCarthy. The Republicans started speaking out against vacating the seat, and then the Republicans started speaking for vacating the seat. Mm-hmm. Democrats just sat and watched. And
you mentioned this at the start, but Matt Gaetz had to stand on the Democratic side of the chamber because all the rest of the Republican caucus was blocking the mic.
They wouldn't let him get to the Republican side of the mic. Now, there was 1 or 2 other speakers on the on the Gaetz side, and then they had about, just off the top of my head, I'm going to guess like maybe a dozen speakers who spoke for how great Kevin McCarthy was. At one point, somebody said, and this is just hilarious, somebody held up their phone and said, Matt Gaetz is fundraising off of this right now. And they showed their phone.
McCarthy said that in his goodbye speech. McCarthy was whining about that too.
And here's what Matt Gaetz responded with, which I also find just as hypocritical as the person who was talking about how Matt Gaetz was fundraising off that, because and here's Matt Gaetz.
My colleague says we've passed the strongest border bills in history. Well, guess what? Look at the border right now. We didn't use sufficient leverage in the debt limit or in any other thing to actually get results on the border. The border is a disaster, really something I don't think you're going to be campaigning on, that you fixed the border. Second, you said you streamlined regulations. What the gentleman from Louisiana doesn't tell you is that all of the regulatory reform he was just bragging about is waivable by the stroke of a pen of someone in the Biden White House. Do you really think you got anything for that? It's a total joke. And then finally, the welfare to work that the gentleman from Louisiana said we got. The welfare programs that they said that they streamlined with their welfare to work stuff, they're actually going to grow. Because while they did work requirements, they blew out those programs with expanded eligibility. I'm real glad you guys didn't put work requirements on Medicaid. It probably would have resulted in Medicaid expansion. And when it comes to how those raise money, I take no lecture on asking patriotic Americans to weigh in and contribute to this fight from those who would grovel and bend knee for the lobbyists and special interests who own our leadership, who have, boo all you want, who have hollowed out this town and have borrowed against the future of our future generations. I'll be happy to fund my political operation through the work of hardworking Americans, $10 and $20 and $30 at a time, and you all keep showing up at the lobbyist fundraisers and see how that goes for you. I reserve.
Now, first off, what's fascinating about this is you got Gaetz listing all the things that they have not gotten in successfully in when they leveraged their vote for the first time. And to be clear, it's also hilarious because this was just, he's responding to a continuing resolution, supposedly. I mean, if we believe that this is about anything of substance,
yeah,
he's responding to a continuing resolution. And everything that he was fighting for, he would have an opportunity to fight for 45 days from now. So it was really just a punting. It was really just, he's been waiting for this moment. And it's just the timing works out for him. That's what it is. The donation thing is also pretty hilarious because while I agree with him, we should not have PACs. But one of his demands could have been, let's pass some statutory laws that say you can't have super PACs. Mm-hmm. Or let's do full disclosure, which would have been certainly within the Supreme Court. Like, there are many things that he could have offered if he really cared about that. His dad is, if not a billionaire, a multiple hundred millionaire. This is the sort of his populism comes from the fact that his entire political career is a function of his multiple generation political family basically covering his ass as a fail son with their hundreds of millions of dollars. If he really cared about PACs PACs in the swamp. He could have made that one of his leverage points, but he never did. And if he really cared about PACs in the swamp, he would say to Donald Trump, hey, man, what are you doing with the PAC? What are you raising this money with the PAC? I mean,
and if he runs for governor, you think he's not going to take some big money down in Florida?
And the vote that he ultimately makes, if he even, it's quite possible he'll never vote in favor of a speaker because that just would hurt his brand. That guy's taking PAC money.
But to that exact point, Sam, so Gaetz has made a point of it to say, me and AOC are similar, that we both don't take PAC money, yada, yada. Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley have sort of gotten on that bandwagon. But if you go to End Citizens United, in the last Congress, not a single Republican in Congress gets an A or even close to an A on their report card because not one of them has signed a pledge to not take PAC money.
Of course. It's a joke.
So as you're saying,
a total joke.
So as you're saying, if that's his standard, who's he ever going to support for speaker? No,
because it doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, he just wanted to make history in this way, and he wanted to get a bunch of attention. And he was successful in that way. But what's also amazing too is that Matt Gaetz really benefited from Kevin McCarthy's brand of doing favors for everybody and crawling his way to the top by just saying yes to whatever the members wanted. Gaetz was under investigation for allegedly having sex with an underage girl, and there was a lot of rumblings about is he going to have to resign from Congress? McCarthy refused to even take him off of his committee assignments and held firm behind him, and then he just stabs him in the back like this because this is the kind of guy that he is. Not that McCarthy's any better, but I'm appreciative of Gaetz creating chaos for if nothing else, but let's be clear-eyed about who he actually is.
There is also a move afoot in the House to expel Matt Gaetz. And frankly, I think that he wouldn't mind it. I think he would prefer if it came a couple of months later. But he has no... he's never going to... And here's the thing. The advantage that someone like Gaetz has, there is no Republican governing agenda. It does not exist. Yeah. Conservatives do not govern. They do one thing. There was a great piece actually by that guy, and I can never say his name. Ettinger
Mentum, yeah.
And he was basically saying The crazy one is not Matt Gaetz. The crazy one is McCarthy. And why? It's because they think they've been able to sort of maintain this fake sort of fiction that they have been sort of driving for years. Because they have been basically saying to the average Republican voter, government is the problem. We need to cut government. We need to get rid of 5 or 3 or 2, departments of energy. Whoops, I can't remember the last one. I mean, this goes back decades. And they've been saying this, but really their agenda has been one thing and one thing only. And it is always this: tax cuts. Tax cuts. George W. Bush's signature achievement, tax cuts. Donald Trump's signature achievement, tax cuts. Ronald Reagan's signature achievement, tax cuts. That's it. The one Republican who couldn't get, who was sort of completely disowned vehemently by the Republican Party was when George W. Herbert Walker Bush said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And then there was, in fact, there were new taxes, and he was gone. He couldn't even get 42%, I think, of the vote at that point. The Republican Party, the conservative mind, is the only thing they're interested in is tearing stuff down and tax cuts. That's it. They don't necessarily want to cut. I mean, I think Trump really does want to destroy the administrative state because they want to get rid of all the regulations, but they don't care about spending. It's not because it's cost money. Donald Trump ran up the deficit and the debt to the point where they can't even make that argument anymore. They don't even talk about it.
I mean, Gaetz
they would like to deregulate.
Yeah, right.
Well, Gaetz does because he's just pretending.
Yes, exactly.
Because he knows he's going to go walk into the governor's office, or he's going to try to in Florida. But this is just, I mean, they have no agenda. Gaetz has no agenda. And so creating this type of a disarray in the House, burning any opportunity to form a working coalition. You know, like, you've got podcasters out there like, we need to make, reach across the aisle and create coalitions. The real place where that has to happen in any way is when you have a divided Congress, and you need to, like, at least make coalitions on your own side to pass legislation. And Matt Gaetz is completely useless in that accord. He's also not going to be on any, maybe he'll have a committeeship, but he's a useless lawmaker now. And he's managed, I think, at this point to at the very least delay Ukraine funding, maybe permanently, but I doubt it. But this is a nominal amount of money, and he does not care. It is just it is an issue set for him, and it is representative of a small portion, I think, of the Republican Party. But he's not going to be able to do any affirmative thing of what he talks about. And this is the fundamental difference between essentially the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, is that within the Democratic Party, there is a significant, I don't know if it's 40%, 50%, 35%, or 60% or 70% of the Democratic Party that is actually interested in policies that are active and responding to the needs of people. And so what's incumbent upon them is to build coalitions. And, one of the things, like, the difference between, Matt Gaetz, again, he's responding to a 45-day continuing resolution. No change, essentially. Something frozen in memory. The circumstances have not changed at all. And when you look back in, when everyone wanted the frankly, smaller number of progressives in the House to sort of inhibit Nancy Pelosi's vote, or to leverage her vote for Speaker of the House. The things that people don't think about is, A, Nancy Pelosi had a 60% favorability rating amongst Democrats. That's the important thing. It doesn't matter that she was demonized by Republicans. 60%. McCarthy's was somewhere around 40%. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about that guy. There's no relationship to him. The biggest thing that progressives got out of Nancy Pelosi was to get rid of the pay-go rules, which should have never been in the first place, but she instituted this. And that pay-go meant that you could get the American Rescue Plan, which lifted, and it sunsetted, no doubt, because of the numbers in the Senate. But it lifted 50%, 40%, 35% of children out of poverty. It essentially has created the best job market that we've had in a long time. Wages are still lagging. We have inflation. That inflation is not necessarily a function of anything other than we had a pandemic. Mm-hmm. Things are still bad for people, but they would have been significantly worse if we had to pay for this stuff, these programs. That was a big deal to get rid of that pay-go. And it wasn't done on the floor. And you had backlash to progressives by the Democratic establishment and keeping them off of committees and whatnot. And I think a lot of people learned a lesson, like, we've got to develop relationships within the context of this, because we cannot overnight change the makeup of the Democrats.
But they have changed something. I mean, again, Nancy Pelosi's no longer Speaker, but I remain more positive about the direction of Democratic partisanship, like in terms of just reflecting on this moment. I'm more positive about the future of Democratic partisanship in the House than I have been in a while, given what Hakeem Jeffries did here, which was keeping the entire Democratic caucus together and giving a middle finger to Kevin McCarthy, because McCarthy has been as untrustworthy of a negotiator as possibly can be. He reneged on the deal that he brokered with Biden when it came to the budget fight that was happening in a few months, and that was obvious that he was going to do that. He then went on cable news on Sunday and blamed the Democrats for the near shutdown, when it was clear that it was always that caucus that was about to oust him. And so, like, there are a variety of things that have caused them to feel, I would say, individually and personally disrespected, and I care less about that, but I do care about the fact that it translated to them not helping out the Republicans. Because you could have seen a time in past history where, you have the problem solvers caucus saying, no, we need to show our bona fides as bipartisan actors, and we're going to cut some sort of side deal with McCarthy to keep him in power. But Jeffries at least kept the caucus together, and for me at least, that's some sign of progress.
Well, I first off, I would say, like, had it been reversed, I'm not convinced that you wouldn't have found some of those problem solvers voting for McCarthy. I don't want to relitigate this, but back 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
The idea of like 3 or 4, 5 Democrats defecting when Ilhan Omar is part of preventing Nancy Pelosi from taking office.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not hard to imagine. But leaving that aside, I think the real thing with McCarthy, the real ultimate calculation was, and I think like all of the slights in the fact that you couldn't trust his deals, et cetera, was just that there's no reason to believe that McCarthy, first off, McCarthy wouldn't make any deal with the Democrats. They attempted. And he couldn't do that because he doesn't want to alienate himself from what ultimately will be his meal ticket, which is a good relationship with 200 Congresspeople on the Republican side. He wants to be able to go to K Street and say, like, I can deliver votes for, from 190 of those people or whatever it is. And he wouldn't be able to do that if he went into bed with the Democrats, because ultimately that wouldn't be sustainable anyways for him. And I think the Democrats realize, like, it doesn't matter. Kevin McCarthy cannot deliver what we need, which is to avoid a government shutdown. And if Kevin McCarthy can't deliver that, which is the basic functioning of government, there's no point, because he's going to be Kevin McCarthy is going to be under the same incentive punishment structure as anybody else who gets into that office. And so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
we shouldn't take a toll on our political cachet if we're getting nothing in return.
But that has not been the consensus in the past, is the point, though. Like, I mean, the Democrats have given a bunch away without getting anything in return previously. So it's a recognition, too, also of the precarity of his position and the fact that he was unable to really govern because of what he negotiated with Gaetz and company, where they could just hold the snap vote on a motion to vacate, essentially. Like, they understood that he would always be the most beholden to the furthest right extremist part of the party, and then that precluded any possibility of real negotiations with him. So F him. Get out of here.